Welcome to FMG's Healthcast. The goal of our show is to inspire you to become the best version of yourself through health, relationships, and in business. Today, we're fortunate to have Christian Ferrer, attorney at law, on our show, and we're going to discuss all the steps you should take if you've been injured in an auto accident or if you've had a slip and fall and you need to hire somebody to protect you. We're going to talk about what has driven him to maintain a high caliber of professionalism and how he maintains balance in his life.
Christian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. As a young, highly driven professional, at what point in your life did you have an internal dialogue where you said, I'm going to go for broke, go to law school, maintain a hyper focus, and then translate that into the type of branding that you do on social media, which is some of the best that I've seen?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, as far as deciding to become an attorney, I wasn't the best student growing up. I did my bachelor's degree at FIU. Mm-hmm. I got my bachelor's in business administration, human resources management. I was getting close to the end of my bachelor's, and I kind of realized that I'm not getting much out of this. Like, it's not something I picture myself
not satisfying maybe enough for
doing, the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I have a few people in my family that are attorneys. I spoke to them, and they advised me, basically go to law school and the door's open as far as you don't have to pick a specific niche. There's several niches that you could do, going into law school. So I decided to go to law school, and it was during law school that I realized, I gravitated a little bit more towards personal injury. Sure. And I have a story behind that, but we could go into it later.
No, we definitely will. Yeah. I want to hear that. FIU is a good school.
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot better. They poured a lot of resources into it. Yeah. You should be proud of that. How was law school? Was it rigorous? A lot of reading, I know.
Law school was definitely a shock because it's not something that during undergrad you could basically do overnight, overnight or study the night before. You could pass a test. Law school, it hit me like a ton of bricks. That first year of law school, if you're thinking about going to law school, just know that the first year is the toughest. If you get through the first year, you're basically going to be an attorney at some point. That's basically any law student I speak to and wants to go to law school, tell them, don't worry about the first year. There'll be a toughest year. After that, you're basically in the clear. Focus on what it is that you want to do as an attorney at that point after that.
Can you work while you're going to law school or even part-time if people need to make ends meet, or is it something you don't advise to do?
For sure, one thing I recommend is get as much experience as you can in law school after the first year. So first year being so rigorous and tough on me, I wouldn't recommend any law student going into getting a job first year because it's very hard. After that, get as much experience as possible in different areas because you might think that you want to get into a specific area. At some point, I wanted to be a family law attorney. And I had an internship with a judge over the summer, and I realized very quickly there is a lot of stress, a lot of drama when it comes to family law, and I knew it wasn't for me. And that was honestly my first interest.
A lot of emotions involved in family law too. Yeah.
I wasn't really even doing much in that internship, and I was emotionally drained at the end of the day. I'm like, I can't do this the rest of my life. There's no way. No.
How do you, because part of our show is to inspire people to, create the best version of, and maintain the best version of themselves and to remain motivated and to remain focused, as you know, is a daily struggle. There's a lot of stressors, especially in our world today. Yeah. What were the paradigms or the methods you used during law school and afterwards to maintain a balance of health, fitness, mental acuity, health and relationships where your time is being supplanted into focusing on your career or studying? How did you do that?
So I realized going into law school, I'll be honest, I was probably in the best shape of my life going into law school.
Physical
shape. When I started law school, it was just the hours of study they have to put into it. I didn't stop going to the gym, but it was a lot less than I used to go as far as going to the gym. First time I took the bar after law school, I was treating that studying, basically studying from 7:30 in the morning till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Wasn't going to the gym whatsoever. I didn't pass the bar exam the first time. Second time I took it, speaking to all my friends that passed it, they told me, listen, you need to have that time of your day to go to the gym, disconnect. It's not you're going to be completely burnt out at the end if you
Sure.
do not have that balance. So second time I took it, I was treating it basically as my bar studies as a 9 to 5. Go into the library, study from 9 to 5, like if it was my job. Go to the gym or go to the gym in the morning, study till 6 or 7, and second time I passed the bar completely. Yeah.
Not to get too technical on fitness, but that is part of what we're doing on the show. Did you, because of time constraints, consider bringing more intensity to your workouts while maybe shortening the duration? Or did you still maintain the same level of length of time for your workout? Because today the research is showing that higher intensity exercise for a shorter duration is better for increases in lean muscle mass, for better overall cardiac benefit when compared to steady state. So for somebody that's cramped in time, or somebody that may be perpetually making excuses that, I don't have the time, if they can just spend 30 minutes doing high intensity exercise and also combining that with a healthy diet, is that kind of what you did, or did you maintain the same type of workouts prior to law school?
And it's funny you asked that, because I've always been, as far as my training went before law school, during law school, it's always strength-based training,
Sure.
hypertrophy,
Sure.
typical weights, chest,
Yeah.
typical split like that.
Sure.
But when it came to the point that I was studying for the bar, I felt a lot less stressed having some type of cardiovascular workout implemented during my workout.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start doing a lot more Stairmaster, a lot more treadmill, make sure I got a good sweat, not focus so much on building muscle, because
Sure.
I'm not going to be building muscle
Yeah, of
while
course.
studying. It's just not going to happen. So
Sure.
I focused more on my mental health, and I felt much better doing high intensity training, cardiovascular training, that type of training.
Good. And in accordance with that, how did you help maintain healthy relationships with your time allotments? Because we don't want our relationships to degrade. So whether you had a significant other, or if you had tight group of friends, or with your mother, father, any siblings, was there a point where you were kind of isolated, or did you do a good job of maintaining that healthy relationship?
For sure. And I think it's a two-way street when it comes to that. My family has always been extremely supportive. They know if I need the time to study, or I need to get things done, they're going to be super supportive. They're not going to take
Sure.
it to heart if I can't spend time with them during the weekend, or miss a birthday, or any type of celebration. It's a two-way street. But yes, make sure you don't miss holidays. Like, don't miss Thanksgiving because you're studying for a test. Don't miss Christmas. Take that time to be with your family, because if you don't have that disconnect, the same way I say, we were talking about going to the gym, you need to have that disconnect. Even if it's to vent to your family about your studying and how stressed out you are, it makes a difference. So make sure you have to, correlate time for your family, for sure.
Good. What do you say to individuals who are on the cusp of wanting to go that extra mile, maybe to professional school, law school, medical school, or some type of professional school, but maybe reticent or shy because they don't feel like they have what it takes? Can you talk about risk taking a little bit, calculated risk taking, and living like life is short. Let's get the most out of what we got going on here, maximizing your inner fortitude. Can you talk about what risks you had to overcome internally? Like, when was the inflection point where you said, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to go forward, and if I fail, I fail, but I'll get back up again and keep going?
Yeah, and that did start with the step of moving forward into going to law school, for sure. And like I said, when I grew up, I wasn't the best student whatsoever. Like, my study habits weren't great. And when I got to law school, I realized very quickly, like, this is a completely different animal.
You got to change habits maybe, or you got to change your approach.
Right. And you get used to it, but there is satisfaction in that, there's doubts that run through your mind throughout that entire process. But when you get through it and you realize, it was completely worth it, that's the best feeling in the world. And as far as moving forward with those risks, whether it be to open up your own business, whether it be, a financial investment you're going to make into yourself, or to open up your own business, there's no way that you could take that next step without taking that risk. And you're going to fail. There's going to be points that you fail, but it's how you learn from that. And then from there, you continue
Yes,
growing.
if you don't fail, how can you learn to be better? Correct. People that may have been in fortunate circumstances where they haven't met that hardship or that barrier where they have failed, maybe they won't have the experience to overcome future things and be even better at what they're going to do. Let me ask you this. You did not work for a law firm when you graduated, or you did for a short period of time?
I did, yes.
Okay. How long was that period before you said, hey, I'm going to get out on my own and do my own business, my own practice?
So going into law school, passing the bar, becoming an attorney, obviously, like, my dream was to open up my own law firm at some point. Did I know it was going to be this soon? Absolutely not. I was petrified of doing that. I was telling myself I needed all the experience in the world, wait 10, 15 years, get as much experience as possible, and then take that next step.
How long was the time that you worked for an attorney and then you?
It was about, graduated in 2017, opened up in 2020, so 3 years. And
that's pretty fast. That's pretty fast.
And the story behind that is, yes, I started coming out of law school. I started working at a large law firm.
And COVID too. COVID happened.
And that's why I'm going to bring up COVID now, because I went from that large law firm. I was there for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then I started working for a smaller boutique law firm.
Sure.
First law firm I worked at was strictly personal injury.
Okay.
The smaller boutique law firm I moved to in the Gables was maritime law and personal injury. So maritime is basically personal injury, but, taking place cruise ships,
sure,
the water. And from there, COVID happened. And that was, right before COVID, I was talking to a friend of mine from law school. He had his own law firm, and we were eventually going to start working together. At that point, COVID had started. I got furloughed from my previous employer. Basically, they couldn't pay me. And at that point, I had about 5 or 6 clients that I had brought on to the firm. And I had that conversation with my family as far as taking that next step to open up my own law firm. So it wasn't really a decision that I thought would make that soon. But speaking to my family, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, they told me, if, you might never have this opportunity again, because if you decide to do this 10, 15 years from now, you're going to have a lot more responsibilities. You might have a mortgage. You might have kids, several kids. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a lot tougher to start a business, because you need a lot of investment when you start a business.
Of course. And if you're spread different ways, it'd be tough. Well, look at you now. I mean, you're, like I said earlier, you got a great social media presence. I notice you do a lot of interviews, and you do talking head segments on social media where you're explaining, typical things in personal injury and advising prospective clients on what they should be aware of and what they should do and the necessary steps they should take if they're unfortunately injured. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think it's one of the best presentations by a young attorney. It's appealing. We've been fortunate enough at Family Medical, and me personally as a provider, to treat some of your clients that got to our office. They have had nothing but wonderful feedback about you and the personal attention that you give that is missing by a lot of firms in South Florida. Because, one of the things I want to talk about briefly was how competitive South Florida is in personal injury in general with attorneys. It's very saturated. Yeah. It's also extremely saturated with medical centers in general that treat all types of patients, particularly those involved in a personal injury environment. You're doing something, in my opinion, that is separating yourself. Your Instagram page is wonderful. You have a nice presence. You explain things great, and you need to hear that, because the props are there for you, and that's why I wanted you to have this opportunity and have you as a guest, because some people might be afraid to take these steps. And I believe you're a motivating factor for people to take the necessary step to go forward, even though it may be not natural for them.
Right.
So,
and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the kind words. And going back to that moment that I decided to open up my own law firm, that was in the peak of COVID. And I had 6 clients. I was living at my parents' house, and I was basically just, my parents supported me completely. My girlfriend basically paying for everything. And obviously things weren't moving at all at that moment. There's no way, even all
not
law
much
firms.
was.
No law firms were retaining much clients at that
Sure.
time, because there's nobody driving on the street.
Yep.
And that's when I decided to get out of my comfort zone and start doing videos on social media. Basically, did it off my iPhone, my desk in my parents' office. Started videotaping myself, giving tips on personal injury, how the law works, things you need to do after a car accident, slip and fall, whatever it may be. And I was doing videos 5-6 times a week because I had all the time in the world.
Sure.
Because I had 6 clients and I had nothing else to do basically other than social media marketing. And from the moment things started picking up, the world started opening up again, that's when the phone started ringing. And I started seeing, I mean, it was 3 or 4 months of nothing. And I'm like, I was very honestly depressed because like I feel like I was wasting my time. I'm a loser. Like I feel like the videos weren't working. And again, getting out of my comfort zone and doing that made a complete difference moving forward and starting my law firm. It basically just springboarded me into, where we're at today.
So you got out of your comfort zone. You did something maybe you weren't comfortable with, something you thought would be effective. And you probably were reaching the audience during COVID, but the audience couldn't move. The audience couldn't act on it. But once everything started to normalize, you saw the repercussions of what you did. And that's great. And that's something I want people that are watching the show to understand. You got to get out of your comfort zone. Yeah. Pressure bust pipes. It's like with training, with physical training. You're putting stress on your body, so your body adapts and gets a better version of itself. That has to translate into other parts of life. And again, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. Let me get into personal injury as a topic because, well, in South Florida, like we said, it's all over the place. You see billboards, you have websites, you have social media, which has gotten so big. We at Family Medical Group, we also treat patients who've been injured in auto accidents, slip and falls, and any personal injury situation. But what separates us and what I believe separates you is the integrity by which you do it. There's a lot of unscrupulous actors in South Florida when it comes to personal injury. There's a lot of fraud in Miami, okay? But one of the things that separates us and you is the integrity by which we serve our patients and clients. How would you discuss with me now the stigma that kind of hangs over personal injury and how you and I and our businesses are built to rebuke that?
Right. So the whole stigma, I guess we're all ambulance chasers. I mean, and I feel like that is a very easy thing for people to think because, like we were talking about earlier, it's a saturated market. Everywhere you look, there's billboards. You're drinking your coffee in the morning. There's 4 or 5 law firms doing their commercials in the morning, and people think. I mean, it's tough because you've never been in that situation. But a lot of people may have never been in a car accident.
But once you are, and you need an attorney, that's when the perception may change. Right. It's like you said, when you haven't been in that situation. Right. But then you want the best possible person to represent you, maybe the best doctor to treat you. Right. Let me ask you this. Patients often ask me questions that are more legal questions because they just don't know. Right. And I'm bound by medical ethics where there's certain things I can't talk about. I try to give as much information as I can. What would you say to a client who, when they come to you, they've been injured, they want to know what the process is? How do you explain that on your end? And do you ever offer any information on the medical side for injuries they're treating for?
Yes, for sure. And that goes back to, yes, the situation that if you do get injured in an auto accident or slip and fall, whatever type of injury case it may be, you don't know who to call. And then a lot of times people do end up calling those billboard attorneys. But, and this is not to talk negatively about, bigger law firms. There's a reason why they're there. I'm for sure most of them started just the way that I started, but they give a call to that firm and they may just speak to a legal assistant and take personnel, and they do not walk through them the process of how this claim works. Our responsibility is to educate the client on how a personal injury claim works. And with my experience, we're able to retain a lot more compensation for the client if they're educated as to how the personal injury claim works.
Sure.
So if they're left in the dark, basically they don't know what's going on, they might completely give up on their injury claim. They don't feel like it's as far as the medical treatment goes, they feel like they shouldn't even pursue the injury claim anymore. But when you educate them, you let them know how this process works, we get better results for our clients.
Now, sometimes you don't really have all the information in hand. Like, for instance, you may not have the opposing side or the at-fault parties' bodily injury limits at the time where the clients are asking you these questions. So you give a general overview of how the process works, which is what we do, except on my side, everything that I recommend for a patient is based upon the individual medical necessity of the patient. Right. It's not a cookie cutter approach. A lot of the treatments we do are the same, but they're different on each person on each day they're there. But even I won't know exactly how, to the extent of the injury a patient has until we do something like advanced imaging, like an MRI, which is an objective look at what the injury may be. How do you navigate through when a client could potentially become dissatisfied because even you may not have all the information to give to them because they want to know at the end, hey, is this case going to work out for me? I'm injured. I have a disc herniation. I'm permanently injured to some degree. What should I do next? Should I go see a specialist? Should I get like an escalation of care, like an injection or a radio frequency ablation? Patients ask me that all the time. I say, look, this is what you may be. This is what you may have to get back to where you were before the accident was. But in terms of whether or not you can move forward with it, that's always a question to also talk with your attorney about, because sometimes coverages are in play and patients are worried about coming out of pocket for an accident that they didn't cause, right? I often have patients ask me, well, the insurance situation here, there should be the other person that pays for it. And then I have to explain to them how personal injury protection works. It's primary in Florida. No matter if you have Medicare or Medicaid, it is the first party payer system first. A lot of patients don't want to use their PIP because they think that their insurance rates will go up. And the reality is sometimes that has happened, and I don't think that insurance companies are supposed to do that in a no-fault state. What do you say to clients when they ask you questions pertaining to their insurance rates or what a finality may be when you don't have all the information at hand? What is it that you say to a client?
Yeah, that's the top question I always get speaking to a new prospective client, as far as why is it that their insurance gets involved if they weren't at fault for an accident? And they're always worried. The obvious question is that, is my insurance going to go up? So in those situations, we explain to the client that is just the way the laws work in Florida. Whether you have health insurance or you don't have health insurance, if you have auto insurance coverage and you were injured in an auto accident, the first $10,000 are covered through your PIP coverage to make sure that you at least have that type of coverage for any type of medical treatment you need moving forward. So there are laws in place in Florida that they cannot legally raise your insurance premiums for using your PIP benefits. And the reason why we are a no-fault state is because the amount of people that don't have auto insurance or driving around without insurance.
Would you encourage people to get uninsured motorists on their insurance policies because of the nature of the high percentage of uninsured motorists on our roadways down here?
Yes, and a good point I want to give is COVID being so recent, obviously that was a very tough time for a lot of people.
Sure.
So what's the first thing people want to do? Cut costs. Since COVID, there has been 30 to 35% of people that have completely cut their insurance to just basic PIP and collision, and that is it. Meaning most people aren't going to have bodily injury coverage.
Right.
And we're seeing that a lot more, and that means you're not going to get compensation for your injuries if you don't have what you're talking about, underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage. And that situation, you unfortunately get into an accident and you are severely injured, you're not going to get a cent for as far as compensation goes for future medical expenses, pain and suffering, all that. So that's why you need to make sure you have underinsured motorist coverage. The difference it's going to make in your insurance premiums is somewhere between $20 to $30 a month.
And that's a calculated risk, like in the example you just gave, where you're severely injured and the other person didn't have insurance, and now you are actually going to be suing your own insurance company for the policy you paid for? Or how hard is it to obtain benefits in an uninsured motorist rider?
Right. So when you purchase uninsured or uninsured motorists under your insurance policy, that is basically you're paying for that service.
Correct.
You may never have to use it. Hopefully you never have to use it. But when it comes time that you need to use it because you got injured in a car accident, it is your insurance company's contractual duty to pay you those benefits, depending obviously on the severity of your injuries. And at that point, if they don't want to pay it, then yes, technically we would be going after your insurance. If that's the case, I mean, I would probably look into switching insurance companies after that if they choose not to pay your underinsured motorist coverage. But your insurance isn't going to go up. They cannot penalize you for paying and using for a service that you're paying for.
Would you say that it's fair to say that insurance companies may push back when you look to get benefits from the uninsured motorist policy because as a business model, they're trying to conserve as much payout as possible?
Right.
In general, would you say that that would be accurate?
Correct. And what they do a lot of times is they request under contract when you purchase your auto insurance policy, you're basically saying if you get into an accident and you're seeking medical treatment, they may ask you to do an independent medical evaluation from one of their doctors.
Or a statement like an EUO?
Correct. And then they're basically, you have to understand insurance companies are businesses. The only way they profit is by basically not paying out insurance claims.
Sure.
So they're going to do anything and everything to basically either offer you the least amount of money when it comes to that situation when you're making some type of claim for underinsured motorist. And that's why you always need to consult with an attorney after an accident, because if not, you're never going to get paid.
You mentioned independent medical examinations, and I mentioned EUOs, which is examination under oath. These are two things that are conditions precedent to getting your PIP benefits, meaning that if you don't do them, they can void your benefits. And I always encourage patients when they get a notice to get an independent medical examination or to give a statement, just tell the truth.
Right.
There's nothing you're going to tell a client. There's nothing I at our medical centers are going to do to a patient that's going to preclude them from telling the truth. It's so easy just to be able to tell the truth. These are the treatments we've gotten. This is the providers we've seen. These are the medical assistants. This is where the office is. And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because at Family Medical Group, we separate ourselves because we invite insurance companies to come in when they want to, see our facilities, see how nice they are, how clean they are, see our equipment. I always encourage the insurance companies to talk to their insureds. What kind of experience are you having? Right. We're not hiding in the rough like some of the facilities in Miami and Broward counties that don't want the notice. They don't want the spotlight. Right. We want the spotlight because it gives insurance companies an option to feel some type of way about their insureds being somewhere where they know it's a high caliber place. Even if it's adversarial with you as the attorney on the other side, if you're a high integrity person, a high integrity professional, the insurance companies are going to look at you adversarial, but they know who they're dealing with.
Right.
Okay. And that's my experience in 25 years in doing this. People are going to be injured. There's how many accidents per year? 300,000 in Florida, something like that. They're going to be injuries. They're going to treat somewhere. We are a comprehensive medical center. We're not just treating people involved. We do full comprehensive medical services. We have contracts with HCA Hospital. We are providers for major medical insurance companies. And the reason why I say that is because, again, the stigma, it's not always what it seems to be. And we really take pride in being one of those medical facilities, if there is an equal, that has an open door. Come in and see our operation. We invite your insureds to come here because, it's a feel-good place and they will get better and they'll get the care they need. And talk about, for me, at the end of a case, when, let's get a little technical. If a patient has a permanent injury on an MRI and then on the other side there's a $10,000, $20,000 bodily injury policy, how often or what are the criteria it takes to maximize a patient's recovery in that exact instance where there is evidence of a disc herniation, which is a permanent injury in the state of Florida? How often do you see that you can obtain the best recovery for the patient, whether it's policy limits for the 10,000? Are there certain things? Because I explain to patients, look, it's not about suing somebody. It's about recovering something for yourself when they ask me. In case down the line with this disc injury that you have, if you're lifting something or bending over, if you're doing something and then you lose capacity for a month or 2 or 6 months because you have numbness and tingling in your arms or legs and you can't do certain things that you normally would do, that recovery is like a savings account for you to help you get through that. It's kind of like Aflac, right? It's not always about just being litigious or being sue happy down here in South Florida, which, some people do have that mindset. Some people just want to go treat because they think they're going to make money. Okay, it's fine. But how would you say to a patient that has the criteria I mentioned, what your efforts are going to be to maximize their recovery, which will be important to them because of the damages sustained by the negligence of somebody else?
Right. And a lot of new clients, when they call my office, they recently get into an auto accident, for example, and then after the accident, they go to a hospital or urgent care. And hospital urgent care, technically what they're doing there is basically making sure you don't have any life-threatening injuries, any internal issues, broken bones, things of that nature. But they're not telling you things that you're going to be living the rest of your life with. So they're only basically evaluating you to tell you you're discharged, you'll live, that's about it. And we get calls from clients, and I let them know that wouldn't be enough to move forward with your injury claim for two reasons. Number one, you don't know what type of injuries you have. If I try moving forward with some type of settlement, depending how severe the accident has, we could probably recover a minimum policy of $10,000, but you don't know what type of injuries you have. And that's why, we work with medical facilities like Family Medical Group, make sure number one, you are getting the best medical care possible, but they're going to make sure we pinpoint exactly what injuries you're going to be living with the rest of your life. A herniated disc, that's something permanent. There's no way of repairing that if it's not through surgery.
Right.
So an MRI, that diagnostic testing is the most important piece of evidence we use to justify getting the most amount of money for our clients. And when it comes to that, that's why, being evaluated at hospital or urgent care isn't enough. You have to seek medical attention to see what type of injuries you're going to be living with the rest of your life, because you got to know what you're dealing with,
And we're set up to do that. And let's talk about one other aspect of the emphasis on consistent and early treatment when you've been injured, because it's important. If you come and visit a doctor and you have complaints, you have real injuries, typically the doctor at Family Medical will prescribe for you an individual prescription of therapy to get you back to as close to where you were before. Mm-hmm. But we don't just always order an MRI right away, like the first day. Sometimes it's clinically relevant, right? Mm-hmm. Certain diagnostic criteria need to be there. But also, we don't want to do it too soon, and it's because we want to give the injury time to settle down a little bit. Because the visualization of a disc injury on day 2 or 3 after an accident is not going to be the same on day 30, because the residual inflammation will come down. We'll have a better visualization of the disc at that time. So I'm going to be speaking to the Miami-Dade County Trial Lawyers Association next Friday, and I'm going to be speaking about the emphasis on early treatment and consistency for the benefit of the injured party, so that we can get the clearest picture of that diagnostic that you mentioned, which at that point, based upon those results, I typically refer for a second opinion if there's a disc injury, a disc herniation, whether it's a pain management specialist or an orthopedic surgeon or a neurologist. Sometimes we do traumatic brain injury evaluations. And those are drivers of getting the best information, the most objective information that helps you do your job. But it's not like I'm calling you on the phone, hey, Christian, I'm at this point in care, I'm doing this, hey, bud, what do you think? No, this is all independent. There's no cohesiveness between me and you, or me and an attorney. Everything I do based upon medical necessity. Everything you do based upon a high level of medical ethics and what is in the best interest of your individual client. And I think that's what gets lost a lot of times when talking about the stigma of personal injury. And I wanted to make our audience know that we're working behind the scenes to make sure that their best interests are at heart, on my side and on your side. And we're not just over here shaking hands, having a drink, making a ton of money at the expense of Joe taxpayer. Right. It's just not the way it works. Right. Now, we do send medical bills in to insurance companies, to no-fault carriers. Right. And just to get reimbursed for our medically, necessary, legally rendered services, okay? When you have an LOP case, which is a situation where somebody has a slip and fall at Publix or Sedano's or Home Depot, can you talk a little bit about how those cases are different? Can you explain what that is? LOP meaning letter of protection, which means that some medical facilities will see a patient, treat them, diagnose them. They know that there's no first-party payor insurance policy that's going to be paying them for their medical services. But at the end, we have an agreement where we'll provide services, and then at the end, maybe we'll hope to get paid something for our services when an injury case settles. Can you talk about the ethics of why that's okay, what a client and a patient should expect in that scenario? Right.
So a lot of clients are concerned, especially the ones that don't have health insurance and they're injured in the hypothetical situation at a slip and fall at a supermarket, for example.
Which happens a lot, by the way.
Right. All the time. So in those cases, we do what's an LOP or a letter of protection, with the medical providers that the client goes to, basically stating that their medical expenses will be covered from the settlement amount as far as what we potentially get for the client at the end of the day.
And there's always a negotiation that goes on at the end. Obviously.
Correct. Yeah. And basically what happens at that point is when we're negotiating the claim with the insurance company, once we reach a settlement, we are able to pay medical expenses for the client as for any type of medical treatment they received. Obviously, there's a lot of risk involved with premises liability cases, slip and fall cases, because that's why you need to go to a good attorney who knows what they're talking about, because there's a lot, they could put a lot of liability on the client as far as when they slip and fall, it could have been the client's fault. Potentially not 100% liability on the insurance company or the corporation or supermarket, wherever it is the location they slipped and fell on. So obviously, at that point, we'd have to evaluate the case and we get the clearance to move forward with the medical treatment.
How has that exact thing been affected by the law changes from March of 2023, whereas now there is a higher burden in the comparative negligence aspect of Florida's law, meaning that there's a little bit more, I'll let you explain it, but basically insurance companies have the ability, for instance, if you're at fault in an accident, if you're not at fault, but if it's 51-49%, if it's 50-50, I think you're entitled to nothing. But if it's 51-49, you are. Can you talk about how the law has changed so that our listeners and the people watching the cast can understand why it's important to document things at the site of an injury or a slip and fall, to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row, so that if an insurance company wants to dig really deep, they can't put the blame on them, even if it's a certain percentage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I remember that day like it was yesterday, because that happened. Tort reform bill went into effect March 24th, 2023. That was my birthday. That entire weekend, with my staff, we spent the entire weekend filing about 110 lawsuits. And that we had to do that in order to protect our clients.
Grandfathered in.
Basically protect our clients' rights, to make sure that they will fall under how the laws presently were before the tort reform bill went into place. And basically, that bill has put the insurance companies priority over the plaintiffs. So they did that basically saying that the court systems were saturated. There was way too much money being paid out by insurance companies, that's the reason why insurance premiums were going up. I got news for you. Insurance is going to continue to go up. Everything is going to continue to go up. Nothing has changed as far as this tort reform bill has come into play. But back to what we were saying, part of that bill was Florida has changed from a comparative fault to state to what's called modified comparative fault. A lot of legalese, so I'll explain to you. But before this law went into place, even if you were found, as far as the jury were to find you, 99% at fault for causing your injuries, whether it be a slip and fall, you saw the liquid, you stepped over it, you slipped and fell. If they found 1% of liability on that entity, you were still able to collect based off that 1%. Now, if a jury finds you 50.0001% at fault for your injuries, you cannot collect a cent for your personal injury claim.
And that's in a car accident too. Like if you didn't yield properly, or if you didn't have your blinker on, or if you contributed in any way where a jury could find that you were 50.001% at fault, you'd be entitled to no damages.
Correct. And that's why now more than ever, and I mean, I do a lot of informative videos on social media on the steps you need to take after car accident, and even more important after a slip and fall, because a lot of people don't know what to do. Basically, at that point you slipped and fell. What I see a lot is people are embarrassed. They want to get out of that store as soon as possible.
Of course.
They don't even want to do an incident report. They're like, oh my goodness, how embarrassing. I got out of the store.
Let's get out of here.
The next day, they find out, they're having a lot of lower back pain. They go see a doctor and they have a fractured vertebrae in their lower back. They didn't do anything to document their injury. They didn't report it, do an incident report of management, didn't take any photos. That makes it very tough on us to prove liability.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder for their attorney, when they retain an attorney, to get as much compensation for them as possible to make sure all their medical treatment is covered.
Well, you do the kind of things that you explained earlier, where you go the extra mile, that maybe a much larger law firm doesn't have the capacity or the ability, because you're not at the level of a Robert Rubenstein or one of the big firms. So it's important to know that if somebody calls you, that you're going to be able to find these things out.
Right.
And it's in their best interest. Help them along the way if everything's not so perfect. If, say, you're in an apartment complex and you get mugged, isn't it true now that if the apartment complex owner can show a certain degree of lighting, or the burden is much less on them to provide fencing, lighting, in terms of making the apartment complex liable for damages because they didn't protect you enough if you're a resident there. Now it's much more in favor of the apartment complex as opposed to the injured party, correct?
Right.
And additionally, if you are a victim of a dog bite, can you now name the dog as a tortfeasor? I mean, because they did it, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's what they're saying. That's what that's what the new law is saying.
Yeah.
That you potentially, or if somebody commits a crime against you and they're a felon, the insurance company is going to name the felon as a tortfeasor, which is a person named in the lawsuit, because they know they're not going to have any resources to pay. They're going to try to put the burden on them. Is that correct or not?
That is correct. And when it goes back to why this new tort reform bill went into play, one of the things what Governor DeSantis was saying that he signed the bill was that plaintiffs' attorneys were saturating the court system. Now more than ever, we are filing more lawsuits than ever before. And it's because these insurance companies are using the laws in their favor, basically letting us file lawsuits and letting, all the evidence come into play, but we could have easily gotten the case resolved a lot sooner. And people don't know when you file lawsuits, things get very expensive, and that affects how much basically you're going to be getting in pocket at the end of the day.